people in.
All right, we're open.
Hi, everyone. We're having people filter in right now. We'll get started in just a few minutes. So please bear with us while we get things going. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Shelley. I am a disability rights advocate at the Ability Center of Greater Toledo. Thank you so much for joining us for our election year Getting People with Disabilities Registered to Vote webinar. We are doing this, the Ability Center is doing this in conjunction with OSILC, the Ohio Statewide Independent Living Council. And we just wanted to have this webinar today in conjunction with the American Association of People with Disabilities is having their National Disability Voter Registration Week as part of their Rev Up campaign to get people to vote. So we just wanted to talk about getting people with disabilities registered to vote and answer some of your questions. Just really quick, we do have a captioner available as well as an ASL interpreter. And if you need anything, please you can ask questions in the Q&A box. I am going to pass things off to my coworker, Jimmy Russell, and he is going to be introducing our speakers for today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jimmy Russell, and I'm a disability rights advocate at the Ability Center. Our first speaker today is going to be Brett Harbage. Brett Harbage currently serves as the Americans with Disabilities Act ADA coordinator for Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose. He joined the Secretary of State's office in July of 2007 to serve as the primary contact for ADA compliance in the Elections Division. He works to interface with SOS officials and with county election officials to facilitate relationships for implementing and evaluating current compliance with ADA requirements. He works to ensure that people with disabilities have full access and inclusion to the election process in the state of Ohio. Prior to joining the Secretary of State's office, he worked for 5 years at a Center for Independent Living in Southeast Ohio, working to ensure people with disabilities could live independently in the community. While at the center, he provided individual and systems advocacy, peer support, training and information for people with disabilities while establishing multiple programs to promote community access and inclusion. Mr. Harbage is a 2000 graduate of Wright State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Business. He currently resides in Heath, Ohio with his wife and 2 kids. Our second panelist for the day is Maria Bruno. Maria Bruno joined Ohio in May 2018 to coordinate the Ohio Votes program. She has a diverse background in community organizing, voting rights, and criminal law. Maria also supports Ohio's advocacy team as a policy analyst. Maria previously served as the director of the Voter Protection Program for America Votes Ohio in the 2016 election, advocated for criminal justice reform at the ACLU of Ohio, and has worked in the criminal court system on both the prosecution and defense sides, having interned at the U.S. Attorney's Office and also the Franklin County Public Defender's Office. Maria earned a JD from The Ohio State University, Moritz College of Law, and has a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Pittsburgh with minors in economics, French, and Spanish. She is licensed to practice law in New York. Maria currently serves as the VP of Communications for the American Constitution Society, Columbus Lawyers Chapter. Born and raised in Medina, Maria is passionate about helping low-income Ohioans participate in democracy through the electoral system.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy. All right. So as I said, my name is Katie Shelley, and I am going to be doing the moderating today. So I will start off by asking questions of Brett, and then we will ask some questions to Maria. If you, the viewers, have any questions while Brett or Maria are talking, feel free to ask those questions either via Facebook or via the Q&A chat here in the Zoom meeting. And we will see Jimmy at the end, and he will help us facilitate a question and answer session at the end of this webinar. So we will get started here. We will start with Brett. Brett, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about voter registration. So one of the first questions I have for you is, who can register to vote?
Thanks, Katie. Appreciate you guys and the Ability Center and OSILC for inviting me on to talk about voter registration and the National Disability Voter Registration Week. So I appreciate that. So for the first question, who can register? There's some qualifications to be a registered voter in the state of Ohio. One, you have to be a citizen of the United States. Two, you must be at least 18 years old on or before the next general election. The third requirement is you must be a resident of Ohio at least 30 days immediately before the election that you want to vote in. The other requirement is you are not incarcerated, in prison or in jail for a felony conviction under the laws of this state or any other state. The fifth qualification to be a registered voter in the state of Ohio, you have not been declared incompetent for the purposes of voting by a probate court judge. And I think I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And then the last requirement is you have not been permanently disenfranchised for violating election law.
Okay.
So those are the requirements to get registered in the state of Ohio.
Okay. Quick question. Does guardianship affect the ability to vote?
Yeah, that's a huge myth. I hear that a lot when I'm out doing voter education and outreach. Guardianship does not affect a person's right to vote or a person's right to register to vote in the state of Ohio. Like I mentioned, the only person that can affect a person's right to vote or register in the state of Ohio is a probate court judge. And that judge would have to deem a person incompetent for the purposes of voting. So.
Okay, so if one decides that they want to register to vote, how do they do that?
A couple different ways. We're pretty lucky here in the state of Ohio. You can do the traditional, you can use the paper form. So if you want to pick up a registration form from our website, ohiovote.gov, you can go there, you can print it off, fill it out, sign that and send it into, you can either send it into our office or you can send it into your county board of elections office.
Okay.
So that's one way. You can pick it up at the library or, a lot of the social service agencies have registration forms available. But the neat thing about Ohio is we have online voter registration. So you can go to ohiovote.gov. You can click on register to vote. Then it'll prompt you to fill in all the required information and submit that registration online. So it's fairly easy to get registered in the state of Ohio.
Okay, and I will make sure that we get the ohiovote.gov link shared in our chat, just so everybody has that as well. Okay, so what is the registration deadline if one wants to register to vote?
So generally speaking, like I mentioned, you have to be registered no later than 30 days prior to the election you want to vote in.
Okay.
So if you want to vote, for example, coming up in the November election, you got to be registered by October 5th.
Okay.
That's 30 days prior to that election. So I highly encourage you. You can register anytime throughout the year. So if you're not sure you're registered, you're not sure if your address is up to date, you can register anytime. So you can register now, you can register today, but you do want to be registered 30 days prior to that election that you want to vote in. So
Okay. And what kind of documentation do you need in order to register to vote?
if you want to go online and register to vote, you're going to need an Ohio driver's license or an Ohio identification card. You will need your name, your date of birth, your address, and then your last 4 digits of your social security number.
Okay.
That's to do it online.
Okay.
Like I said, if you want to do the old-fashioned way and use paper, you need all that information. When you do paper, you can use your last 4 digits of your social security number, or you can use your driver's license number. So it's a little bit more lenient on the paper form. So.
Okay. All right. And are there reasonable accommodations available to register?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, with the options that you have here in Ohio to register to vote, if you go online, you can use that form. It's completely accessible. If you have a disability, you're using assistive technology, a screen reader, for example, that's going to be accessible to you.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, you won't need a reasonable accommodation to get that process done. You can do it independently and take care of it yourself. But if you do need some kind of assistance or an accommodation, feel free to call your county board of elections and let them know what assistance you may need. And they'll be more than happy to help you get registered. If you need help filling out that form or whatever it may be, you can always call our office as well.
Okay.
Call me directly,
Okay.
and we can help you get registered if you need that assistance.
All right, wonderful. And so final question for you. What advice do you have for people with disabilities who want to register to vote?
I guess my biggest thing, and what I tell people is, get registered now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait. Don't wait until it's too late to update your address. You can go to our website and check to see if you're registered. You can go to our website and check to see if your information is up to date. You could always just call your county board of elections or call our office, and we can verify that you're registered.
Okay.
But voters do have a responsibility to make sure their information is up to date. Make sure that they're registered to vote. You definitely don't want to wait, to the last minute, or if it's too late and you figured out, oh, well, I'm not registered, or I thought I was. So, my biggest thing to tell people is to just double check your registration by calling the board of elections, call our office, or like I said, you can go online to our website and check that yourself. So.
And when you say our website, are you talking about the Vote Ohio website?
Yeah, sorry. When I say our website, I'm talking about the Ohio Secretary of State's website.
Okay.
Yeah, so ohiovote.gov. If you go to that website, then it's fairly easy to find out where you can check your registration. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And so now we will go over to Maria Bruno from Ohio. Hi, Maria.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I did just want to say one thing. It's and I do this all the time as well, but it's actually voteohio.gov. I just checked to make sure that I had it right before I wanted to say that out loud.
Okay.
FYI.
Thank you. All right, so Maria, would you be able to describe your program, Ohio Votes, and what is being set up across the state for people that are interested in voting?
Yeah, so Ohio Votes is an initiative of Ohio being the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. Our role as Ohio is to advocate for affordable housing and homeless services. And so in that capacity, we have great connections with a lot of different homeless providers and affordable housing units and housing units dedicated to folks with disabilities and all of that. So we wanted to take advantage of that. So we started the Ohio Votes Initiative, which specifically targets underserved communities and low propensity voters. Underserved communities, of course, encompasses folks with disabilities. And so we have worked in the past with the Ability Center, which is how we made connections, as well as Access Center in Dayton and a few other folks around the state, LEAP in Cleveland. And so we work with them to basically help them develop out programs that reach their audiences. So if they have a certain community that they already serve, we want to supplement whatever they're doing with access to voting resources, information about the election, opportunities to register to vote. And so we help train the folks who work at these organizations to do that work, but then we also offer volunteers from the community to come in and help that work. Of course, this is all pre-COVID minded, so a lot of our programming in the past has been in person. But we have been, adapting to the times as much as we can. And more than ever, we know the value of strong digital resources because people are, of course, staying home more, as they should. And so we are also helping different nonprofit organizations. First of all, we are entirely C3, so 501c3. So we are completely nonpartisan, don't support any party or candidate. All of the information that we provide is nonpartisan. All of the resources that we provide is nonpartisan. If you go to our website, ohvotes.org, we link directly to the Secretary of State's website. There's no funny business. And so we are able to help develop voter education resources and other opportunities. And then, of course, we have National Voter Registration Day, which is this year, because it's a presidential year, it will be a week long. It'll be the 4th week in September. And so we often will host a bunch of different events for voters to register to vote, request an absentee ballot, look up their ballot, and all of those wonderful things that come along with voting.
Okay, wonderful. So what resources are available for people who want to register to vote?
So we offer, we have resources such as videos and one-pagers to help both folks who want to register to vote as well as people who want to help other people register to vote. Especially, around the rules of when do you have to put the helper's name on the form, and correcting the misconception about guardianship, making people aware of curbside voting as an option for folks who have mobility issues. And so I would visit ohvotes.org and check out some of those resources. And like I said, if you want to register, you can click right through to the Secretary of State's site, but you can also pledge to vote and take advantage of some of our other good stuff on our website. And it's super easy if you're helping a bunch of people check their registration at one time. It's kind of designed to be specifically mobile friendly. So it'll load quickly and it'll allow you to kind of search one after another pretty quickly. And so I would definitely recommend that tool to folks who are either registering or helping other people register.
Great, thank you. Who can you call if you face discrimination in voting? For example, if you're told you can't vote or have trouble voting because of a disability?
Yeah, and there are a lot of I think that the Secretary of State's and boards of elections do a wonderful job trying to make sure that all of the poll workers are properly trained. But of course, mistakes happen, and people do, unfortunately face those additional barriers sometimes. So the Disability Rights Ohio has an all-day hotline on election day. It's open on other days, but I believe it's a callback number other than on election day. And they're really familiar with some of the intricacies of voting law and disability rights. So they're very helpful in navigating those really, really niche questions. There's also the Nonpartisan Voter Hotline, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, which is run at a national level, but staffed at a local level. And so those folks can also help, help the voters know who to contact or know their rights, or be able to help them problem solve whatever they're facing.
Okay, great. And so the Ability Center is based in Northwest Ohio. We're hoping that this reaches people throughout the state of Ohio, but since we are based in Northwest Ohio, we were just wondering, since some of our viewers probably are in Northwest Ohio as well, are there any resources specifically available here in the Northwest Ohio area?
Well, I do want to plug your guys' awesome candidate forum. I know that you do that every year, and it's always a really great way to meet the local candidates. We have a regional liaison. His name is Liam Walsh. He's a student at Bowling Green, I believe. And so he serves as our sort of local contact, and that's really helpful because he'll have a chunk of like literature, posters, buttons, voter registration forms, all of the things folks might need on the ground to help, advertise the election and, educate their constituencies on some of the options and resources. So he's available locally, both to help you organize your events, help you staff your events, or just give you some stuff and some resources so that you can put on your own wonderful events.
Great. So this last question I have is for both Brett and Maria. So if you want to take turns answering, or if one of you feels more comfortable answering, what are some effective ways if people want to help and get people to register to vote in their community? How can they get the message out to get people to register to vote?
Go ahead, Maria.
Okay. I didn't want to jump in too early. So the thing is that peer-to-peer advocacy is the strongest route to actual effective, meaningful advocacy. And so if you want people in your own community to be registering to vote, you need to be helping them do that. And so that sometimes is just sharing ways that they can do that. Sometimes it's making them aware of deadlines. A lot of this is just information sharing. But also it's galvanizing the community by focusing on the issues that they care about. We are completely nonpartisan, but none of that stops us from having deep, meaningful conversations about what's actually on their ballot and what's at stake. And I think the more that you can do that and you can make the community realize the value of participating in the election, plus making them aware of all the resources they have to make sure that they can actually vote, that combination is really all you can do, and that's the best case scenario. And I also just wanted to say one quick thing that hadn't come up yet, is there is a misconception sometimes in a lot of communities that requesting an absentee ballot is also registering you to vote. And so I just want to make clear that as you guys are doing that outreach, to make sure when you are helping folks request absentee ballot that they are already registered to vote. If they're not, and Brett, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if they're not, I believe you can turn in both the registration and the absentee ballot form at the same time. So they can do both at once. But that is like a huge problem where people think they're registered, go request an absentee, and then they figure out that their absentee ballot got rejected because they weren't actually registered. So that's also something to make your friends and family aware of.
Yeah, I think, as far as effective ways to help people get registered to vote, I like Maria mentioned, working with like the disability organizations around the state of Ohio, the advocacy groups, I think that's the most effective way that, people with disabilities can get registered. If you're having an outreach event or whatever it may be, maybe bring along your registration forms. That's, I think, the best way, working with those organizations and agencies that you trust. The other thing that we have a NVRA coordinator that works with all the agencies that register people to vote. Like, for example, OOD, if you're signing up for services, for employment services, they're required to, ask if you want to get registered. So, we try to, I know our NVA coordinator, she does trainings for those agencies. So, she's constantly working with those agencies and making sure making sure they're following the process that they should be to be asking those people that are signing up for services, do you want to register? That's one way. Also, like I said, any organization, disability organizations you're working with, I think that's you guys asking them, hey, do you want to get registered, and having campaigns like what's going on this week around the country. So those are all effective ways to get registered or get people with disabilities registered to vote.
Okay, great. Thank you both so much. So we are now going to switch over to our question and answer session and hopefully answer some of the audience questions. But before we do, I just wanted to let you guys know, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but at the end of this webinar today, before you close out, or when you close out, there will be a survey. If you could all please participate in the survey, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you. And now I'm going to bring Jimmy back in, and he is going to help us with our question and answer session. Hi, Jimmy.
Hello. All right. So the first question that I have for you is, can a person that is blind do absentee voting?
That's a great question. And I'm glad, whoever asked that, I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to say recently, but it is pretty recent. In November of 2018, we implemented what was called remote ballot marking, but we're trying to change that name to just absentee voting, accessible absentee voting. So basically, essentially what that does is it provides an accessible ballot to somebody who has a disability. I'm going to apply for that ballot the same way I'm going to apply for a vote by mail ballot. It's a little bit different. It's a different form, but the same information. So I have to apply for an accessible absentee ballot to my county board of elections. I'm going to fill out that application, send it into my board. I'm going to get an email basically with a link to my ballot. What that does is it allows somebody to get their ballot on their computer, allows them to use their assistive technology, whether it's a screen reader or some other assistive technology to mark their ballot. Once you have marked your ballot, you do have to print that ballot and then sign it and mail it back to your county board of elections. So there is a little bit of a process with getting your ballot, getting the email to you. But it does allow you to vote your ballot privately and independently. And again, once you mark that ballot, you do have to print that, sign it, and mail it back to your county board of elections. So, but it's called accessible absentee voting.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question that we have here, anyone can feel free to answer this, is it says, we serve individuals who may be homeless or trying to transition to housing. How does that affect their ability to register to vote?
I can take this one. Yeah, so that comes up all of the time. And technically, based on the law, you could register to vote at a park bench. But of course, that's going to be a really hard place to receive mail. And that's also not going to be, the best case scenario for the Board of Elections to deal with. So what you are allowed to register at a place at which you tend to return. So if you have, for instance, a homeless shelter or a church or some other building that is nearby where that person tends to stay, we recommend that they ask that homeless provider or church to let them use their address for the purposes of registering to vote. So they would essentially be registered at the church or registered at the shelter. And I have not come across a church or shelter unwilling to do that. But that also is something that the boards of elections sometimes get wrong when they're giving feedback. We have had a couple incidents of that. So don't just pick a nearby building and register to vote. But if you have a nonprofit nearby, you can register to vote at that nonprofit. And then for the purposes of having an ID that actually allows you to cast a ballot, if you vote early and or by absentee, you need the last 4 digits of your social security number, and you don't need any physical form of identification. So that's a really good option if you are worried about having that proof of residence that you need on election day voting.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna have that being answered. Oops. All right. So the next question is, I'm worried about voter suppression in regards to mail-in ballots, especially now that more pressure is being placed on the USPS. I guess they're just wondering what kind of assurances are out there to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Sorry, what was the question again?
So they're concerned about voter suppression in relation to mail-in ballots. I think their concern is that the USPS isn't going to be able to get the ballots in on time or things like that. Is there any assurances that, make sure that an absentee ballot is counted and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, our office, we have some administrators in our office that work, constantly with, the U.S. Postal Services. And I think with that relationship, we're going to, make sure that ballots are delivered to the Board of Elections on time and that those ballots are counted. So.
Okay.
Also, I know that there is a national advocacy effort around making sure that the USPS is properly funded in order to make sure that they do have all the resources they need to stay on top of the mailings. And so, we've got 2 senators here in Ohio. We've got several state representatives. So, making that clear that that's a priority to you as a voter is definitely something that folks can proactively do now. And also, just as far as the voting timeline, and this is something that the Secretary of State and the voting advocates agree on, is the 3-day window is really short. So what often happens is folks wait till the last minute. I am as guilty as anyone else of doing this. But then the turnaround is a really, really, really tight window. So they have 3 days between the deadline to ask for an absentee ballot and have to have it turned into the Board of Elections, which is, that's 3 rounds of mail. So that's a lot. So I would say the biggest way to avoid voter suppression is have everyone be asking for their absentee ballot as soon as today. Get that absentee ballot request in as soon as possible. Don't waste till the last minute. Don't wait till the last week. The more time we can give the USPS to, get the ballots where they need to go, the better off everyone is.
All right. We got a new question that just came in. They said, are we able to drop off our mail-in ballots on election day?
Yes, and that's not at a precinct, so not at your polling location. You want to drop it off to your Board of Elections, their main office. So, yes, that is an option.
And someone asked if you guys could give the deadlines again for voter registration and the requesting an absentee ballot deadline.
Yeah, the registration deadline is 30 days prior to the election. So for the November election, October 3rd, or is it the 5th? Yeah, so October 5th is the registration deadline. And then to request an absentee ballot, you can request that up to 3 days before the election. So, but again, it's highly recommended to request those ballots, now, as early as you can. So, like Maria said, don't wait until the last minute to do that.
All right. If you have,
sorry, can I just jump in here
Sure.
real quick? Just FYI, someone asked who our Ohio senators were. We just wanted to let you guys know. It's going to be Senator Rob Portman, and Senator Sherrod Brown are our federal senators. Go ahead, Jimmy. Sorry about that.
Sure. If you have family members or friends with mobility issues that have requested absentee ballots, are you able to collect and drop them off at your county boards for them, or does the person who completed the ballot have to be present at drop-off?
No, there are, a family member or a friend can drop those ballots off for you. I was trying to look for the list. So it's pretty broad as far as who can, drop that ballot off. So it can be a spouse, father, mother-in-law, mother-in-law, grandfather, grandmother, brother, sister, daughter, um, step parent, stepchild, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece. Um, so it's pretty broad as far as who can drop that ballot off for you.
And some counties actually have drop boxes, so you're not necessarily even dropping off to a physical person.
Yeah, and actually, there's a lot of counties that are installing drop boxes that you can just drive up in your vehicle, and or you can get out and drop those off as well. So,
Is there a way to know if your county has drop-off boxes?
I guess the advice I would give you is just give them a call.
Yeah.
The County Board of Elections?
Yeah, just call the Maine County Board of Elections and see if they have a drop box and ask where the location is. But typically they're right next to their main entrance or so yeah, definitely just give them a call.
Yeah, and that's the case for a lot of these like little questions because we have a pretty decentralized model for how we run elections. Boards of elections have a lot of authority to make their own choices on how they administer the election. So a lot of things do vary, and frequently the answer to a lot of these questions is call the Board of Elections and ask.
All right, speaking of ballots still, someone asked, they said they requested their mail-in ballot months ago, and they asked when they should expect to receive them in the mail.
So the ballots aren't even finalized until I think it's the first week of October as to what's going to be on them. So I believe that it's at early voting is, and Brett, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe at the start of early voting is when they begin mailing those out.
Yeah, so yeah, the day after the registration closes and early voting starts is when they start to mail those out. So
Okay. That is all the questions we have for right now. I mean, unless somebody else has any questions.
Somebody just popped up with a question in the chat.
Right.
When should someone request accessible absentee voting?
So it's going to be the same timeline as, if you're going to request a, absentee voting by mail, a mail ballot. The accessible absentee ballot is the same time frame. So
okay.
Sooner the better. But you can request it up until the third day prior to the election. So.
And I'm not sure that this has come up yet, but something to just to be aware of is folks are allowed to have someone come in and help them vote on the machines. There's a couple different caveats to that, which in summary could really be if someone has a legal position of authority over you, they cannot be the person that helps you vote for obvious reasons because you don't want anyone to be, pressured into voting a certain way, but you can have someone from your family or friends. It just can't be a union representative, an employer. There's a third one that's slipping my mind, but it's the same principle, which is someone who could essentially force you to vote a certain way. So that's just something also to be aware of as far as your options for going to vote.
All right, got another one. It says, okay, this is something separate. Okay, given that we are now in the masked era, will the Board of Elections be making or looking to make any accommodations for people who are deaf or hard of hearing who decide to vote in person? For example, will any spoken information be in writing? Are the poll workers equipped with pen and paper or dry erase boards in case they need to communicate with someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, what we communicate to county boards of elections, and we have an election official manual that has a lot of information on, how to assist a person with a disability. And when it comes to somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing, the interaction between a voter and a poll worker is pretty minimal. It's not interaction where you're at a doctor's office or it's legal information. So, we do instruct them to simply grab a piece of paper and write back and forth. So, that has been communicated to county boards of elections. The great thing about the November election, all poll workers that will be working on election day are going to be trained. So that should be, hopefully will be reviewed in their classes and in their training sessions. So yeah, that is an effective way to communicate. Since it's simple interaction, you can just communicate through pen and paper. So.
Okay. Can anyone submit the absentee ballot request on behalf of others? Like if there was a voter registration event, can they collect the forms and drop them off on behalf of those that register?
Yes. So if you mean if a group's at an event and they are registering people to vote?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably what.
Yeah. I think
Yeah. So if I go to an event and I register, have 10 people fill out a registration form, I'm going to bring those back to my office and turn them into the Board of Elections. So an agency that's doing a voter registration drive, they can do the same thing.
That being said, you could not, go rogue and request a ballot on their behalf without their permission, of course. So the voter's signature does need to be on that request form. And so, of course, the voter will still have to be involved, even if they're not the one physically mailing the form.
Okay. Another question. If we have requested a mail-in ballot and have not mailed it in, are we permitted to still go vote at our polling place if we decide at the last moment?
It will be provisionally because essentially they have to confirm that you're not trying to vote twice. So once it's confirmed that you didn't also turn in your mail-in ballot, then your provisional ballot will then count. But obviously that's not ideal because it creates kind of a headache for everyone to figure that out. So don't request a mail-in ballot until you know that's actually how you want to vote. But if you forget and it's not going to get postmarked in time or whatever that might be, you can go vote provisionally in person, which will then count after they've confirmed you don't turn in that form, the mail-in as well.
Okay. Now we are out of questions again. So unless somebody else sends one here, I think that about does it for the question and answer session.
Okay, great. Well, Brett and Maria, I just want to say on behalf of the Ability Center and the Ohio Statewide Independent Living Council, thank you both so much for being with us today and talking about voter registration for people with disabilities. And thank you for sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Do you have any final thoughts or something you want to say to everybody about voter registration or just voting in general?
The last thing I'll say is thanks, Maria, for correcting our website. I was saying it wrong. So it's voteohio.gov.
Okay.
Go to there. There's a lot of information on there. You can get registered there. Don't wait if you're going to request a ballot by mail. Get those requests in early. That way the Board of Elections has time to process them. If you are registered, go ahead and just double check your registration. That way that you can confirm that it's up to date and you're ready to go for November. So that's all I would have to say. And the other thing I would mention too, thing I was thinking about when Maria was talking about, if a voter has trouble on election day, whether they're being questioned by a poll worker, in my opinion, the best thing to do, we have a hotline and I'm on the phones all day on election day as well. So just call our office directly and directly ask for me. Maybe I can, if you get in touch with me on election day and you're having an issue, maybe we can rectify that situation right away. We can find out what precinct or what polling location you're at, and we can, make sure that you can exercise your right to vote. So.
Yeah.
Right.
And I agree. There's no quicker pathway to getting your problem solved than just contacting the people who have the authority to fix it. But it's nice to have those supplemental resources as well. So, I would just say, I think that so frequently people are turned off by the elections because of the ugly politics and all of the things that come with it. But also because we don't necessarily instinctively see the fruits of our labor. We don't necessarily see why our vote mattered, and therefore we tend to think it didn't. But, you know, voting matters. Honestly, even if you lose, the percentage by which you lose determines, you know, how politics are going to continue. So I would just really encourage folks to understand that each vote matters and is important. And it's worth whatever headache might come your way. You have the resources with the Secretary of State's office, with nonprofits who are doing our best to help you, you know, navigate all things voting, but your vote matters and it's important. And a lot of folks don't like the government because they don't feel it represents them. And the quickest way to get that government to represent you is decide who's in it. So I just cannot emphasize that enough.
So we did get another question here if you guys still have time to answer. People asked if there is transportation assistance for people that need it on voting day.
Great question. So in the past, again, pre-COVID nightmare, we had volunteer rides to the polls where we would match up volunteers with riders. Of course, within the disability community, there's a lot of extra considerations if you need handicap accessible vehicles and all of that. So we do, our Ohio Voter Rights Coalition has a subcommittee that is specifically dedicated to transportation for the sake of elections. So that might come in the form of making sure that there's free bus rides. It might come in the form of working with a nonprofit who has disability accessible vehicles that can be utilized to take folks to the polls. Again, I anticipate it'll be a little bit messier because of COVID, but we will have a hotline number, and I highly encourage folks to utilize the resources that we are going to be doing our best to provide.
Okay.
And I also want to say, and Jimmy, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you are the transportation expert, but I know locally in the Toledo area, our transportation system, TARDA, offers free rides on election day for TARDA buses and our paratransit service, TARPs.
Yep, that is accurate.
Okay.
At least it has been. Hopefully they
Right.
still do
I mean,
it this
hopefully
year.
it'll be this year as well. It has been in the past. So. All right. And I just wanted to give you guys a quick anecdote. Someone just commented in the chat that they were actually able to help their son register to vote in a different tab while listening to this webinar. So they wanted to say thank you so much. So thank you for what you do, you guys. It's working.
Wonderful to hear.
So,
Great.
great. All right. Well, if that's everything, I think we will wrap this up. But again, Brett and Maria, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who attended and asked questions, and hopefully we will get people registered to vote.
See you.
Great.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you,
everybody for
everybody.
attending.